the problem with Wildgate. Wildgate. A demo recently came out, and concluded, that the public got to try out and gather feedback for the final release of the game, which at time of writing is exactly 45 days away from playtest end. And, good God, was it fantastic. My eyes were full of hearts and my soul was whisked away into an ephemeral dance with this mysterious stranger who I had known nothing about until I vaguely liked the sound of some of the more schizophrenic reviews the game had on Steam. Right after that review in particular, I immediately conscripted a crew of my friends to embark upon our maiden voyage together. After grappling with the slow helm controls for a bit, I naturally sat my ass down at the captain's chair, as I tend to in these kinds of games. Despite the flying being slow and restrictive, not my ideal sort, my veins calling for the allure of dying in a flak cloud and the Mach fuck inside of a jet, of course, or the flexible and complex maneuvers allowed to me by Elite Dangerous, especially with flight assist off. But I still enjoyed it, because the more I played, the more I realized how wonderfully it clicked into the style of play the game provided. The intricacies of ship combat, the flow of a match, the sensors, the information war, the strategy involved. I won't lie, I could probably talk about 3 times the length of whatever this video is going to end up going for, just about how magnificently they nailed the ship combat alone. And that should be massive praise considering that's the main point of the game. Right? 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 Well, I was under the same impression too, until I saw this fuckwit. These two, though the problem isn't exclusive to them, are what pulled me out of the beautiful dance I was having with this mysterious stranger of a game. They ripped off the mask, well, I would say fancy dress, but I must admit the art style of this game is ass. It's bubble sci-fi, I fucking hate bubble sci-fi, and for being so heavily stylized, it runs unacceptably close to maxing my system for daring to render it at the high native resolution of 1080p. But yes, they ripped off the paint and showed me the internals of this stranger I was dancing with, whom I was getting a feel for. It was this magnificent piece of machinery that made my fans spin and my servos quiver while I was looking at the ship combat part of it. As I reached further into its massive wires and machineries, its beautiful mechanics and intricate interwoven delicacies, I laid my hands upon a hard, cold lump of something festering underneath. My hand guided by this smarmy motherfucker with 4 arms and this little uvu moth with his cloak. The dreaded FPS sweat hiding underneath this wonderful dame I had thought virgin and pure. She was harboring something so vile and putrid. My heart sank on the spot. Years of trauma from ship games doing this to me left me reeling away on the spot, recoiling, watching in disgust. But I pressed deeper in, out of morbid curiosity, out of a desire to figure out something deeper, out of a necessity to educate myself on why this niche genre of games always fucks me over, like the Silicon Valley tech bros that say they're making robots, and they always try and make them look human, with fake fleshy faces and uncanny valley robot rooted in the evil of their souls. Just give me the LED face and let me see their wires, damn it! Minor tangent aside. See, this is the greatest ship crew combat game I've ever played. Maybe ever? But everything falls apart when you introduced its FPS mechanics and boarding. Now, I'll preface everything I'm about to say with this. Boarding in concept? Absolutely amazing idea. It serves to add more depth to the ship combat with even more varied options for tactics and plates to spin in the grand scheme of things. Going evasive means you're turning your weaker or lesser amount of guns to the enemy, meaning less crew is able to actively shoot, meaning you're naturally inclined to send some of them away to distract the enemy, sabotage their course, suppress their weapons, anything to just give you a little bit of time in order to break line of sight with asteroids or eventually speed away. Loosely speaking. Obviously, it depends on a lot of factors, but the basic gist of it is that while you're flying away from someone and they're flying towards you, boarding becomes a lot easier since the total travel time for the boarders is lower. And there's other fun things you can do with boarding too. there's ramming, there's ambushes at outposts, etc., etc. However, boarding is not just another tactic you can use in ship combat. Boarding is not even an exceptional tactic in ship combat. Boarding, and forgive me for saying this word, Lord, is the de facto meta. I hate metas in video games, but I hate complaining about it even more because I've found in my many years of just being my silly little self and having fun in games however I desire, that meta just means the generally known tactic that people default to because it's solid. And in fact, most other things are viable too. There's even stronger tactics out there that will reward you greatly for breaking the shackles of playing meta. However, Wildgate's boarding meta is problematic in that it turns this spectacular ship combat game they've crafted into a really shit FPS. To the point your ship tactics and competency as a crew, in that regard, do not matter, as the enemy can choose to just force you into boarding if they so desire, something they should force you into, because if they're any good at all at it, even if they're not better FPS players than you, should always force a boarding fight in one kind or the other, because getting into one of the biggest problems with it, boarding has an innate return on investment that's way too good for how little the boarder has to put in, and counterplay is limited. Now, this is for a multitude of reasons. So let's just start with the main offensive boarding tactics and why they're so problematic. Culprit 1. Handheld hull damage. The double whammy is a gun that one-shots crew and deals ship damage. I'm actually fine with these stats, if not for the fact that it has 20 spare rounds. Combine this with drill charges, and one boarder can swing roughly 30 HP from you with relative ease while breaking ship modules and glass. See, the main problem tactic with boarding is how you're able to sit on the roof of the ship, break the canopy, and deny the helm from doing anything while you pump damage freely into their ship. To counter this, you can only sluggishly get one of your crew members to go through a door and try and engage the enemy boarder from a worse position, all while they can rotate at any moment and threaten another ship system, a crew member, or even steal and teleport. Getting to this later. Which has now put you down at least 2 crew members, ship health, and potentially much more, for one really easy action on the enemy side, leaving all interesting potential ship tactics out the window as the helmsman just has to sit in the corner, cry, and hope that his boarding team can pull off a similar miracle. At which point, it's just an FPS match, and no longer a fun ship fight. Culprit number 2. Teleporting. In Wildgate, you can teleport back to your ship at a moment's notice with anything in your hands within a second by just holding C, with the exception of holding the game-winning artifact, which needs to be flown back manually. I really like the teleport mechanics. It makes for a lot of interesting plays you can make, and logistical considerations to optimize while looting and even for laying traps and ambushes. However, someone can stealth in his moth, steal a gun while you're on it, and instantly teleport back to their ship, and have now swung a major gun advantage to their side. This means, if you don't catch a boarder, the split second they show themselves, you are risking losing the firepower fight right then and there. Or some other important module that can swing the balance of the fight drastically. And most of the time irreparably. Your only choice to unfuck the turkey? It's to go in and fuck theirs. Hence, 1 or 2 boarders that know what they're doing have effectively negated all ship tactics and instead forced the board off. And I don't know about you, but if I wanted to go engage in an FPS, I'd just go play a good one. If you had to physically leave the ship doors to teleport out, that's fair enough. That gives some valid time to react. But as is, it's way too oppressive if you're not instantly aware. And even slotting a gun out can be pretty meaningful on its own, as someone has to scramble to get it back in and reslot it, especially if you do well as a boarder and kill more people before you're brought down. I think that could be genuinely more fun for both sides of the engagement and open up more choices for the boarder, instead of just going for the easy and oppressive choice. The final culprit, I won't even give a section to. I'll just mention that the 4-armed guy is annoying since he doesn't even have to go back to recharge his drill charges to keep breaking stuff. He can just do it with his hands. Although I still believe the other boarding characters are more oppressive because they can just get back after recharging quicker. I know someone would oust me at the stake if I didn't mention him, so there you go. Now you might say, All of these complaints don't matter too much because there's anti-boarding characters, modules, and even the Bastion, a complete anti-boarding ship. Here's the issue. The character that gives you wall hacks on borders, and the module that alarms everyone when a border is in, only activate when a border physically passes through the internal doors of the ship and is inside the walls. This means that they are practically useless, as the main threat of borders comes from the outside just sitting on the roof. The only one of these modules that matters is the shock kill field, but even that only thwarts one attack before another can come take its place while it's on cooldown. If all of the effects that only activate while the borders are in the ship instead activated when the border enters the gravity field of the ship, you can't make it while they're touching because they could just hover a little bit above it and circumvent it easily like that. This would entirely be solved. Almost. That, along with the change to the double whammy to make it have a fourth or less of the total ammo pool, would make it still really good as a secondary weapon for a border, but force them to either make a move and change tactic, or teleport back home for more ammo. Also, as for the Bastion, absolutely useless ship. Never should have been approved out the docks. Whoever designed it is an orc war boss without the power to make it anywhere near the glory of an orc war machine. It has one tactic it can do, and it's camp for an artifact win if it's lucky, or try and board on an intercept path to the artifact win. Both of which entirely rely on boarding, because in a ship fight, it's a slow, helpless, pitiful little thing with HP that only serves as a timer for the boarding team to complete their mission. And with the double whammy and security devices stated prior, the anti-boarding part of the ship also means nothing, so you're not even safe from the enemy boarding meta if they choose to not just blast your ship outright. The other three are really fun and varied. I'm happy the starting ship is, in my opinion, the strongest of the three, because having to unlock it would suck. Though, with patience and a good captain, the privateer can be an absolute delight to fly. The Scout has interesting options, especially with laser rams. I think those three are in a good spot, but the Bastion is just a noob trap. Now, I haven't mentioned some of the counterplay you can do against boarding, namely the roof Korean strat and 24/7 around-the-clock probing. But again, these are all things that require heavy time investment up at all times in order to be effective, putting you at a disadvantage if the enemy chooses to not board, and if they do, the border will likely only be neutral in terms of risk/reward. Assuming all things go perfectly for you. Now imagine if you fuck up. Even once. Even for a moment. If they snipe your counter sniper, if you don't get a split-second reaction timing to a callout, now your main weapon is gone and on their ship actively shooting you. To put it another way, the boarders only need to get lucky once. You need to get lucky every time. Now, I've had fun in spite of these issues, because early in the playtest, most people didn't know about these problem tactics, and I didn't employ them either, since they're boring. But as people got more acquainted with the meta, the quality of rounds drastically drops, and it's just no longer interesting to play against. The fact it's happened so quickly in the playtest's 2-week trial makes me really concerned for the health of the game long term. Especially because discussion about the game doesn't seem to address really anything about this. People are absent-mindedly complaining about things like how the auto-aim weapons are too strong or other little FPS oddities, and it doesn't really matter? Yes, those things should probably be tweaked. From a straight-up logical perspective, it makes sense that the auto-aim guns shouldn't be better than someone hitting all their shots with a non-auto-aiming weapon. Though, if they do address that issue, it's actually going to backfire and make the disparity of oppressive boarding even worse. As now, if the enemy is better at FPS than you, they have a higher skill ceiling to curb you under with. But the main point of the game and focus should be the ship combat. It's clear that the FPS side is fairly weak and only serves to better the ship fight part of things, so I'm concerned that the core audience for the unique ship gameplay they've developed is entirely going to be squandered and thrown aside in favor of the FPS players who want their adrenaline rush, and I just don't have the faith in the devs to cater to them. One bad week of balance changes is all that it'll take to destroy their fragile enjoyment of the game before they move back to playing the finals, hunt, whatever other FPS they were playing beforehand. Though, of course, not before they've seal clubbed everyone underneath them of the more casual or ship focused player base out of the player pool. Because no matter how coordinated, how communicative, how well you play as a crew, the FPS skill is the part that acts as the be-all and end-all barrier. If you don't have it on equal footing as your opponent, you've already practically lost, even if every other part of their gameplay is worse than yours. Now, there's just one more issue. Who wants to hop on the Wildgate demo?
I do. Yeah! I do. Send me in, boss. I'm ready to play.
All right. Who wants to pay $30 on release?
30?
30. I mean, I would, but...
But yeah, me too, bud. Look, this is the issue. You've created a competitive space where not having a full team of friends on comms will lead to a miserable experience that makes you infinitely more susceptible to the main fun-draining meta activity, while also handicapping all creative strats you can pull severely because the stoned guy behind the Xbox that queued in as your fourth doesn't even know what's going on, or takes a hit of his bong every time the respawn timer starts to tick, or there's just any lull in the action whatsoever. Look, I'd spend $30 on this game. Hell, even if its boarding problems persisted, if I could just have a fun time with my friends, I'd do it because I love the ship combat so much. The only thing stopping me is the fact I'd need to spend $120 instead for a 4-man to join me. And even then, that's 4 out of 10 people I played the beta with. Even when we had 10 people to choose from, I couldn't get a full stack going as often as I'd like. Now that the number is down to a static crew with no fun of cycling people around and sharing the experience like that, why bother? For something that's going to die within a few months, or at worst become a miserable experience choked out of its core fun by boarding, this is the sad truth and sentiment that's going to run rampant among most considering buying the game. Meanwhile, as a solo player, why bother in the first place? The game is too competitive in nature. If you just gamble for teammates constantly, you're gonna have a shit time, more so than any other kind of game. Because in other games, you can control your own destiny or not care what happens to the team score at the end. If you're on a pub in TF2, nothing you individually do will impact the fun of your teammates negatively, unless they're really sour, sweaty individuals who want everyone on top of their game. Sure, sucking complete ass might lower the odds of your team winning slightly, but the team in Team Fortress 2 doesn't actually mean much. You're all just having your own individual moments of fun entirely removed from the end score screen. If your entire team is throwing in a match of Counter-Strike, there's still individuality at play you can express to have fun or even clutch rounds or engagements, even if the end screen says you lost. You at least had a chance for fun in spite of it. But here, the ship is everything. And if you choose to have selfish short-term fun, you sabotage the other 3 people playing with you, which you will be playing with because there are 0 viable options to play with anything less than 4 crew members, and 0 physical options for playing with more. Leading to that kind of fun shortly lasting and never accomplishing anything. Not to mention that the games I listed above and the countless other examples you could pull like Barotrauma have several other ways to play the game with a varying number of players. In Barotrauma's case, the PvP is just a fun side mode that only lives on because it's got a small band of community servers filling out the niche. Another thing Wildgate doesn't have: community servers! If you were to look at Sea of Thieves as a much closer example, that has PvE content to actually engage in meaningfully, despite a lot of its draw and allure being PvP. Though, more importantly, it also lets you have a variable crew size, as opposed to a fixed 4. But Wildgate holds nothing of the likes. It's $30 to engage in exclusively in its PvP battle arena, with some sorry excuses for NPCs sprinkled around that are exclusively there to act as roadblocks for the pacing of the game. Just to drain your resources. Just to take time and attention away from you as the player. And for what? They perform serviceably, but they aren't actually fun to fight. No sane person would play the game just waiting happily to engage in that combat. I feel like, in the 45 days between demo end and full release, there isn't enough time to address all of the issues, to add content, or to really fix some of the fundamentals plaguing the game. This is something that needed course correction some 6 months earlier, and then a final stretch of small fixes to tweak weapon stats and whatnot. The ship combat and strategic layer are fantastic. Don't even need much balancing. Honestly, they kinda knocked it out of the park there. Except for the fact that if you don't have a Sal on your team, you're at a major disadvantage. The salvage pool means that you are always comfortably equipped, and any loot you find is potentially the exact loot you want. Whereas if you didn't have him, you'd just dump stuff out the airlock and waste time. Plus, the damage control of having one man play fireman while two active gunners pump rounds downrange and a captain swapping between helm and gun mean you have no hope of outgunning a ship with a Sal in a head-to-head fight. Assuming other factors equal, which they won't be because they have a Sal and you don't. I digress. But the boarding issues? The player retention question? The fact their limited time window to make patches to the game in its opening months will be slowed down by Microsoft and Sony certification required, as it's a crossplay console title? The middle management and the 50 to 100 person team working on the game? The fact you can't enjoy the game without a full team communicating? And the fact you can't even try to play it like a ship combat game without those communicating team members also being decent enough at FPS to repel boarders? It just spells disaster. It's a game that made something beautiful and then squandered it all by throwing that beauty aside, making it entirely worthless in comparison to just clicking on people with a gun. This game is simply not worth it. And I guarantee you, whatever small changes in 45 days they make will not make it worth it. If you can buy it with a half-decent group who will play it with you for 1 to 3 months straight before the game dies and you're all happy with that, I applaud you. Go ahead, buy it. But for the rest of us, do not buy Wildgate. Steer clear, because the way I see it, the only way it has a chance at actually living is during its rebirth. A second wind of some sorts. Since they're not going to delay the game or make hasty, risky gambles of changing the entire game around so close to release, they need a second chance after it's already died, or on the brink of collapse, to see it through to what it could be. If they actually get their shit together, buckle in, and let the ship combat flourish, make a major sale after, or even go free to play, it could breathe and be one of the best games released this year, with enjoyment to come for years and years after launch. But that's assuming they want the ship combat to be the core. Let's look at it from another perspective for a moment. What if the ease of boarding, the focus on weapon balance, the complete disregard of ship combat discussion was all intentional? What if they don't actually mind the state of boarding as is and encourage the game to just be an excuse to shoot each other with guns like any other FPS but with a different framing device? Just look at the trailers. The literal first scene is an eye on boarding. The ships only explode when boarders have a hand in it. The story they tell in the preview trailer is one of someone playing the ship game honestly and then just getting fucked over by a literal, singular boarder. Gods, just look at some of the streamers they got to promote the game. Pestilli? Aqua FPS? Summit 1G? The fucking Peanut? These are Tarkov streamers. Why in the ever-living fuck would you get the Tarkov audience to try your ship crew combat game? Why are you trying to poach Tarkov players? Everything I've said so far was with best intentions in mind. Even in an ideal scenario where they're actively working towards this solution to the issues, it's a rough ride. So now, just imagine for a moment that they don't actually have that vision in mind. It all falls apart irreparably on the spot. There's no hope if that's the intent. But, look, I can't read minds yet, so I will only look at it through that optimistic lens. But the fact all I've outlined above is the optimistic outcome. Just imagine the realistic one where things go worse. I've seen great games die one too many times to trust so blindly when this many alarm bells ring out for Wildgate. It's got so many red flags around it, I could mistake it for my ex. So I'll treat it like them too. I'll say I enjoyed my time in the playtest while it lasted, because it truly was a magical period. If you ignore the issues that cropped up and sit solemnly at the end of it, knowing it can't hurt or burn you anymore, not thinking too hard about it, and only holding out hope that if you were to ever meet again, you see a completely changed person. Oh, you're still here? Well, thank you so very much for watching this entire ramble. It genuinely means a lot to me and makes me unbelievably happy I've managed to captivate your interest for long enough. Hopefully it's been informative or thought-provoking. If nothing else, I aim to get a giggle while just opening up the faucet of my autism. If you did make it this far and are still listening, maybe leave a comment or a like so that I know the effort was appreciated. Other than that, I stream at Twitch on Sundays at 2 p.m. UTC for Barotrauma, and then there's some stuff that happens after around 4 hours from there where we play Arma with FP Arma, and I mean, yeah, that's alright, that's everything. Bye!